All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick's on the Power. So one of my subscribers actually sent me an interesting topic that I've never really thought too much about before, and that is the men's Olympic gymnastic team, specifically their insane bicep development. So personally, I've never been the biggest fan of the Olympics. I never really watch them or go out of my way to watch them, so I certainly wasn't very familiar with the men's Olympic gymnastic team. Specifically, the one this guy was mentioning was the one from 2012. But when he gave me this topic and he asked me this question on why they have these extremely developed biceps, I Googled some of the pictures he was talking about of some of the athletes that he had mentioned, specifically Jonathan Horton, Jacob Dalton, and a guy named Brandon Wynn. And of course, all of these guys had pretty muscular physiques. I mean, they're Olympic athletes, they're high-level athletes. But particularly, the guy that sent me this question, he was right. All of these guys actually did have extremely developed biceps to the point where they were disproportionate to the rest of their body. I mean, these guys, they had huge biceps. So the subscriber that mentioned this topic, he asked me two questions specifically. Number one, why do these guys have such developed biceps? And number two, would it behoove a bodybuilder to include some sort of gymnastic routine in their training if they wanted to build bigger biceps? And I thought this was a very fascinating question after I saw the photos of these guys that he was talking about, and I realized, okay, there might be something to this. These guys do have extremely developed biceps. So what is it that they're doing in their gymnastics routines or gymnastics training that makes them have this extreme bicep development? So I started looking through the list of gymnastic events that these athletes go through, both the men and the women. Typically what I think of when I think of gymnastics is the floor routine when they're doing flips and stuff. They're judged on their landing, how many flips they do, how artistic their routine is. And I also think of the balance beam. But one thing that I hadn't really thought of or didn't really realize was gymnastics was an event called the still rings. And this is actually something that you see in a lot of gyms, especially CrossFit gyms. There are two rings suspended from a wire cable on the ceiling. And typically in a gym, you're going to see people doing pull-ups on these. So this is what got my attention. So obviously a pull-up is going to activate your biceps as well as your lats. So I said, okay, let me go ahead and look at some of these athletes that this guy had mentioned, Jonathan Horton, Jacob Dalton, and Brandon Wynn. All of these guys, if you look at their career and their accomplishments, they all excelled in the still rings. All these guys that had very, well-developed biceps seem to also do very well in the still ring. So I went ahead and looked up what a still rings routine really consisted of. And I've got to say, man, when I watched one of these routines, I was extremely impressed by what these athletes actually do. It's really a whole lot of balance and really raw strength, specifically, though, the arm strength. What they'll do is they'll pull themselves up in like a weird position, and they'll statically hold their bodies in that position, just exclusively straining the muscle to hold the body weight there. And it's very fascinating. Now, the main thing that I noticed after watching some of these routines is the number one muscle that seems to be activated here is going to be the biceps. I mean, as they pull themselves up into each static position, they start from the base, so they start from the bottom. And the biceps appear to be the main muscle that really initiate the transition from each static hold to another. And one of the poses that's mandatory for all these guys, it seems, is to pull themselves up into a crucifix pose with their arms fully extended at either side of their body and holding their entire body weight with their arms out to the side, which is very impressive. There's a lot of arms and delts involved in that. But some of these guys, what they'll do is basically a front double bicep and just statically hold their body weight in a front double bicep pose, which I found to be very impressive. So I would imagine if you're a guy that specializes in this still rings event, probably the majority of your training is doing pull-ups or bicep movements on those rings. And that's why these guys have such big biceps. Now, a lot of these guys just have big arms in general. And the other exercise or the other routine that I found to be responsible for this is something called the pommel horse. So essentially what this is it's like a balance beam with two handles on it. And essentially the entire time, these guys are using their hands. I don't think their legs can touch the balance beam. So they're supporting their entire body weight on their hands and arms the entire routine and using momentum and tricep strength pretty much to move their body around. So that pommel horse routine to me looks like it's pretty much exclusively triceps and arm strength, maybe a little bit of shoulders. But aside from momentum, most of the weight and most of the pressure is going to be on these guys' triceps when they're doing this pommel horse. So that would be another reason. So a lot of these guys, in addition to their gymnastic routines, also have a bodybuilding routine to go with that. So it's not like they're exclusively doing, just rings. It's not like they don't go to the gym at all and they're just going to the gymnastic training center and just doing rings all day. They actually do have a supplemental bodybuilding routine where they actually lift weights and train with weights to achieve these physiques. So I wanted to dispel kind of that myth. that these guys are achieving their physiques exclusively through these gymnastic movements, because that's not the case. I do think, an exercise like the rings, if you're training that constantly every single day, working on your bicep strength to do this, still rings exercise, that's certainly going to contribute to the size of your biceps. But every single one of these guys is in the gym doing weight training or some kind of bodybuilding or strength routine aside from just the gymnastics routine. So I thought this was an interesting topic. I'm actually going to start incorporating some still ring pull-ups into my training routine. Instead of just doing regular pull-ups, I think it would be beneficial to incorporate some of these where it seems to activate the biceps a lot more than it would the lats. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I hope you guys found this video interesting, and please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.